So we're starting. I have these books here, and well, been reading them. Found them at the library at a free rack. So they're religious somethings, pamphlets that had to do with Buddhism. So as I was going over them in my free time, and not from the beginning to end, just wherever, I found that I liked what I was saying, and so I felt I should you know, piece something together in a recording about it then. Yes. It mentions a lot of key ideas and sort, but goes over life forms, say. So it talks about the different and which would be considered more sentient, like animals to humans, versus the plant. So the animals to the humans then are more sentient or just more feeling, I suppose. Do I agree? Not necessarily. I think there's definitely plant species that are sentient and feeling, and there's those that aren't. And I feel like perhaps the ones that we are taking in, you know, don't necessarily have a kind of pain receptor in the same way. It also mentions the slaughter of, the animals, and how that's a very dirty but unclean act. Then, and I would absolutely be in agreement. I think so, and I think you can even see it in a person's face to their body, how that affects them to take in that kind of food. But it's almost an absolute fact when we know that in factory farming they are placed in these very confined quarters with the other, and are are necessarily not fed properly or watered, but given contaminated food, and have to exist in their own refuse. Even they're also pumped up with antibiotics, which is supposed to protect them from sickness, but actually has the reverse effect, where um, it actually makes them more prone to becoming ill. And I think it increases their size as well, sort of like the GMO plants and pesticides. So overall, it's very I think harmful for one's own you know, mind, surely, but health. hmm There is also mindfulness. So it speaks about ways that you can necessarily become just that, more mindful. One is through breath, obviously, inhalation to exhalation. I felt for myself that was too difficult, too labored. Then, sort of like the object and fixing on that. Yes. Yeah. Posture from sitting to standing, and even cemetery meditations. And that was the more interesting something that did appear within the pages, where it asked you to necessarily contemplate, your own physical body and the decaying of it, but the passing away. Since we must know that it is not permanent, it's impermanent. It will change. And in knowing that, we are given relief, but we are freed from that cycle, as they would call it, of pain and suffering, but samsara. Sure. The Kasinas is another say, and that reminded me of the Kachina dolls of the Hopi people, but it's a separate. So that gets into the minor parts of it through their text and through the elements, and that's really interesting that you can somehow connect at that level of the earth, air, fire, water, and even the material, like space. And I felt that that was even the most baseline of the states that one could potentially be in. There was also the mention of, let's see, renunciation. And renunciation is actually, I think, a Christian term as well. It is. This is not just specific maybe to And that's where you're giving up, sort of surrendering then, which is important. Mm-hmm. The cravings and the desires. In that, sort of way, we are mhm, freed then. Mhm, we are. There's also samadhi. So samadhi is for one pointedness, but that's this heightened state of enlightenment that one could reach by an object, perhaps, and who knows what that object is. You don't necessarily. I mean, it could be a sphere, perhaps a ball, ball, say, right? Um, I think is difficult to achieve by one person, even by those that are practicing this in a more deeper way, and that's consistently, and that's simply because we are turning all the time in the thought, and through matters of survival, we are not in a fixed sort of. I feel, mm-hmm, they we aren't. Mm-hmm. So people tend to ricochet between one or the other. It's the thought versus the no thought and the no self. Mm-hmm. The only real person I felt who could have potentially achieved this was one that went out into the world then. Mm-hmm. So they gave up everything. And they gave up the need to live, say, which would have brought with it these, the cravings, the desires, the attachments. It would have. Mm-hmm. Sure. There's also a comment on, purity in the sexual relationship. hmm This is practiced there. It is, but to a certain extent until it isn't. But I feel in this day and age, that's lacking so much, and we can see that in the culture. Definitely can the fixation on the image, but the violation of the human physical body. It is most definitely across the board, and it always has been, I guess, for women. Right. And so, what is the solution? I think the solution is to intellectualize or spiritualize the person. Then they have to become that somewhere. hmm but it's also not bringing yourself into these deeper thresholds of thought, and thought that is lowered, that is more sensual, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Speech. So there's false as insulting or sarcastic, and there's idle, and we can check these. We can check these certainly, and I think most people are privy to them. But the idle is very interesting because I feel most people don't realize that they are speaking about nothing necessarily, nothing meaningful. And when they do communicate, it's very self-centered. It is. Well, that's where the word of metta that comes into play here, where we are practicing loving kindness towards ourselves first. We are feeling and experiencing that, and then we can necessarily, I think, generate that in the form of speech. We're using the manner of talking then. Sure. There's also the mirage. Okay, so the mirage. And kind of going after that as thirst. It's something that you really want, right? And that brought to mind the analogy of the pond to the fish. So they ask you instead to be the pawn instead of the fish, and that's the mind instead of the thought, right? But how about the water instead of the thirst, and then you're sated. Sure. Mm-hmm. The state of the world, which has been so much in question too, and it has the violence there, and that called to mind, I feel, yes. Mm-hmm. What? A new definition of life. Mm-hmm. We need that desperately because we don't know what's what. Mm-hmm. Right? When the murderer is taken out within a few years and then put on death row, to the unborn fetus, protected, and then the animal on our plate to in a sanctuary. Mm-hmm. Causality, and this was wow, sort of eye-opening, but I think in a bit basic, sort of general purpose way, isn't it's referring to that idea of cause and effect. Then sure, mm-hmm. The intention, and that's such a part of, I guess, our word and our actions, right? But it made me think of what was outside and out there too, and what what was and how it came into being, and an originator. Mm-hmm. Since I'm studying religion here and there, and I'm studying practices and spirituality and that sort. Mm-hmm. And I can say that I wasn't satisfied with Jesus or a Buddha as that figure that could completely represent that for me. And even Jesus, who was sort of in communication with this God, who was higher, but was vague and unnamed. Mm-hmm. Then it didn't, mm-hmm. Resonate with me. It just didn't. That's where science came in. Mm-hmm. It had, and it's finally, I think solved this problem, dilemma. Mm-hmm. Looking at it in a biological way through the life processes, the elements, and even the single once more of hydrogen, oxygen, the water, made sense to me as what we could consider a kind of cause to it all, but the originator is the creator, say the God. Mm-hmm. Right, right, and this is sort of an irrefutable fact as I know it. Um, since it's been proven that everything was sort of sprung from it. Mm-hmm. The aquatic life, the this single cell organisms, even in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And imagine the repercussions of this, which I think in time would be very beneficial to those species, say, but kind of incredible how we would interact with this at the level of beliefs, a belief system, a ritual. Mm-hmm. Time, past, present, future. Mm-hmm. Sure. Interesting that where you are now, it can move potentially very slowly according to what you're doing. And you could, maybe, if you're there, be in this eternal sort of moment. But years later, when you're looking backward, you can see that it was actually very fast. And there's that difference. Sure. Mm-hmm. But could we calculate that eternal, something by a number? Mm-hmm. What does that look like? And the people in the earliest days, they really were in that, since they had no clock or schedule, even if the sun rose and fell. So in time, when their brains changed, they became larger, they become more sophisticated, then they could, mm-hmm. And they could understand what was around them. And then, something that was like that was built, it was put in place. Mm-hmm. Sure. The day and night became, visible. It was visible then. The seasons were, and that's where we required everything to be sort of ordered. Mm-hmm. But imagine if we then got rid of that. Would it affect what was around us, leading to that kind of unified state? Mm-hmm. Is that where we're heading somewhere? If there's a natural disaster, if there's changes on the earth, I think that's the original that we would have to return to again as a whole.